Welcome back. The Labor Party in New South Wales elected a new leader yesterday, Michael Daley, who's promising to set the reset button. Probably not a bad idea either, after his predecessor was accused of drunkenly slipping his hand into a female journalist's underwear and then, instead of going quietly, said he'd been defamed, vowed to take the journalist to court.
The allegations against me today, made public by the ABC, are false. I've retained solicitors and senior counsel to advise on the immediate commencement of defamation proceedings in the Federal Court of Australia.
Luke Foley wasn't the only one to come in for criticism in all of this. While he may have been the chief offender, even though he still denies it, the Liberal Minister, David Elliott, has also been forced to apologise after referring to this incident last month in Parliament as he went after his political opponent. No thought was given, it seems, to the victim, the ABC journalist Ashley Raper, and whether she wanted this made public at all. She didn't. It's not the first time a woman, a victim of alleged sexual harassment, has found their story being made public against their wishes for someone else's political gain. Let's bring in our panel this morning, Labor strategist Bruce Hawker, former Liberal MP Fiona Scott. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with Luke Foley in all of this. Now, we need to keep stressing he denies the allegation. He's threatening to sue. Bruce, was that a little bit too defiant from him on Thursday afternoon?
I thought so. I think situations like this are best kept brief, sure, but I think you're better off just saying, you know, I'm leaving, this is untenable, whether I did it or not, it's never going to go away under my leadership, and it's time to give somebody else a go. I don't think it's a smart thing to say you're going to sue for defamation.
I'm going to lawyer up and go to the Federal Court, particularly when her statement, Ashley Raper's statement, was so believable.
Yeah. It was also so itemised as well, with the key times and the events. Yeah,
it was like, here, I've got a witness. I've obviously got a phone record of the fact we spoke for 19 minutes the other day.
And when she'd had conversations with people at the ABC, the fact that Sean Nichols came out so quickly and said, I absolutely categorically agree with everything that she has written in that statement, and that's exactly the way I would retell the events as well.
What needs to happen? I mean, this isn't the first time, and sadly, it probably won't be the last time an incident of inappropriate or sexual harassment type behaviour occurs. The journalist in this case is in an incredibly difficult position, right? And we see this time and again with women where a powerful man is involved. Can you understand their reluctance, Fiona, to go public? Because this was 2 years ago. She clearly didn't want to.
Yeah. Look, I asked the question that if it was, say, Luke Foley and a woman within the Labor Party that this had happened to that was inappropriate, would have the journalists sat on it for 2 years? Or would have they been able to have it out there? Because this has been, you know, one of the secrets that has been known by everybody in Macquarie Street in Sydney. So I think it's one of those questions, is because it's a journalist, was there a different line here? Was she then protected by the ABC? I mean, then you've got to ask the question, as she wanted privacy for this length of time, and then she's come out and then said what she has said. What made her be quiet, and what was then the reason for her speaking? And I think there's an element there.
What do you think? What do you think? Why did she want to stay quiet about this for so long?
Look, if I was in her position, I probably wouldn't want to make it a public issue either, because if you're trying to do your job, you don't want to be defined by something like this. And if she's worked so hard to get to a certain point, to then become a part of a media story when you're somebody that reports the media, I think that's a challenged position. Then all of a sudden the ability to go and meet ministers or text people to get stories, I think it would potentially have issues with how she could do her job. So I can understand, as a woman who was interested in her career, why she'd make those decisions. But in the context of the Me Too, I mean, it's that sort of behaviour in many ways that we've seen women come out in Hollywood in particular and fight back against staying quiet on this. How many people or predators who may be doing unacceptable behaviour?
Women are essentially being told through the Me Too movement, aren't they, that it's okay to speak up.
Exactly.
That, you know, you should be believed. You will be believed. But there's clearly still, Bruce, a reluctance to do so. And then I guess you fast forward to Fiona's other question. Why did she decide to put out that statement on Thursday? Where does the where does the blame lie for having to do that?
Well, I guess that the reason she came out and made the statement was that once Elliott started discussing it in the Parliament, it became notorious, it dominated the media.
It had been reported previously without names or much detail.
But once her name was obviously circulating around media and other social media networks, it puts her in a very difficult position, doesn't it? Because by continuing to say nothing about it, it might give an impression that she didn't actually see it as being a significant thing that had happened to her. Whereas I think she, by her statements, it's clear that she did think it was a significant problem, but for the reasons that Fiona and others are mentioning, she decided she wasn't going to say anything about it. But once it's out, I think that's a totally different story, because they'll be saying things, people will be saying things about her.
And she wanted to set the record straight.
She needs then to make it clear that, that she didn't do anything wrong and why, she's making the statement now and so forth. I think that's very different from saying at the time, look, I would rather this thing go away. Once her name's out there circulating, whether it's not front and centre in the media but still around the traps, I think it became a very difficult thing for her to say silent.
Well, this gets to the question about the Liberal Minister, David Elliott, who used this, I used the word earlier, weaponised it in Parliament to go after Luke Foley. He's not the first one to do this with little regard for the woman involved here. He's since, I think it was yesterday, wasn't it, released a statement saying he's very sorry for that. So he's apologised for that. But, you think back at different times, women who've made complaints and want them dealt with quietly. Not that, in this case, Ashley Raper had made a formal complaint, but, the Catherine Marriott example didn't want her name, wanted this dealt with internally in the National Party, but her name was leaked out. Is there a broader problem there, Fiona, of politicians using rumour and what they've heard about, a political opponent's behaviour against them with little thought for the woman involved?
Look, I go back to what I was saying before about the Me Too movement, and in many ways, a lot of the things that came out about Harvey Weinstein, for instance, and I'm not making any aspersions in this issue, but it was actually other people saying, I saw Harvey do these activities, I saw this happen, and therefore it then opened the floodgates for all of these different people, in particular women, to step up and say these sorts of things. Now, if it wasn't a male Conservative man that was saying this, would we have a different story here on David Elliott as well? So I just think there's a conflict there in regard to how David Elliott's
perhaps,
treated.
but what's the motivation? Now, maybe David Elliott's motivation really was, to try and get justice for Ashley Raper and all of this. But given he is standing in Parliament, on the floor of Parliament, against his political opponent and using this against him, it looks very much like he's using it for political gain.
Yeah. And Elliott is running a unit that's doing the dirt digging. So, that's doing the rounds of politics and has been for months too. So I don't think it's any particular coincidence here that Elliott was the person that made the comment. And I think he did it with malice aforethought. I think he knew exactly where he was going with this. I don't think it was just a throwaway line in a heated debate.
Do you think this will change now? Will all sides stop this? Stop using those sort of issues against their political opponents?
I hate being overly cynical, but I think in many ways the cut and thrust of politics is people will, there's inevitability that some people will use the lowest straw that they can find, and because politics is so combative.
Well, the new leader, Michael Daley, no surprise that he won the leadership yesterday afternoon. Bruce, he's saying he'll press the reset button. As I mentioned, probably not a bad idea. He's from the right. Luke Foley was from the left. You've only got, 4 months or thereabouts?
135 days.
135 days, right. Will this put Labor in a better position than they were under Luke Foley? Before all this blew up, they were polling, 50-50 with the government?
OK, so, the terrible week that Foley's had aside and the allegations that have been aired, he was a pretty effective opposition leader. He was going about doing his job well. He might have sold his family story a little bit better and done a few other things, but essentially he was doing what you expect of opposition leaders leading up to this point. Daley, though, is looking very fresh. I think he's articulating a position for Labor, about health, education, planning, which is a huge issue at state level in New South Wales, creating jobs. he looks good. He's come out of the blocks well, and I'm not just saying that for partisan reasons. Looking at him on the TV last night, I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. He's got his family there. He's starting to tell a story about himself, which is critically important in politics. So, yes, it's going to be tough, but I don't think you're going to see Labor doing let's say the furniture exercises he made quite clear. All right, well, maybe he'll find a big bus, put his name on the side of it, and drive around the electorates. Fiona, what did you make of Scott Morrison's ScoMo Express in Queensland this week? It came in for a lot of scrutiny. Perhaps I would suggest a little too much scrutiny on how often he was on the bus, how he ate meat pies and what cap he was wearing at the time. But anyway, how did you think
It's a long time to May, David. It's a long time to May, and the campaign buses have started, and that's, you know, be prepared for a campaign bus coming to a town near you. Yeah. I think that's where we're at.
You know, normally it's not prime ministers who do this stuff, it's opposition leaders, plenty of them, Tony Abbott, Bill Shorten, so on and so on. But he is in an unusual situation where he's got to get himself known and noticed, particularly in a crucial state like Queensland.
Oh, he's got to be out there doing it. I just think it's tough because, you know, the journalists are focusing on it. Often they're on the bus as well, and anything that goes wrong, they're going to make a fun of. You know, I remember Christina Keneally did that when she became Premier in New South Wales, and the first day the bus got a flat tyre, you know, and then it just becomes emblematic of the problems that you have. Happened with Barry Unsworth back in the early days.
Do you remember when the Rudd bus broke down at Rooty Hill RSL and the Tony Abbott bus had to give it a jump start?
All those things are just appalling. So, yeah, I think they should be a little bit careful about the buses. I sort of get it, but they become a bit cliched, and I think I'd be aware of it.
But at least he had a pocket full of announcements as he roamed around, and they all went down pretty well. He got a lot of good local media coverage in Rockhampton, Gladstone and so on. Look, I want to turn to the other election that has been run, and that was the midterm election in the United States. You've just returned, Bruce, from there. We saw a change in the landscape in Washington. The Democrats now have won the House. The Republicans, though, did, if anything, a little better than expected in the Senate. So Trump's happy, the Democrats are happy, everyone's a winner. You have been putting together a documentary on what's going on in the US at the moment. And before I get your comments, I think we've got a little bit of... is this you talking to some of the
people in the street?
People in the street. Oh, let's have a look.
He was serious about making America great, but I've always thought it's great anyway.
And then you get, we want to make America great again. That was meaning that, you know, we're going to go back. We want to go back to the good old days, which means those were the days that, you know, were my most terrible days in my life.
I love Donald Trump. I think we're going in the right direction. I think he's strong enough and tough enough, and he's business savvy.
Certainly his position on trade has had a lot of adverse effects on a lot of people.
The way he treats people.
Yeah.
I mean, we're separating families.
Yeah.
He's a pig about women.
Well, he's a man, and he hadn't done anything that the rest of us haven't done.
But now I think women are the issue, which I'm very happy to see.
Bruce, what did you learn so far in this journey?
Well, that America is a terribly divided country, and the results of the election demonstrated that. A lot of people are still prepared to give him a go. They're saying it's only 2 years into his presidency. Let's see how things happen over the next 2 years. But they are putting up a lot of flags, and they're saying if we don't sort out this trade issue with China, it's going to be very serious.
People are worried about that in America.
They are. We went to Minnesota, for example.
Pretty bipartisan support, though, for what Trump's doing.
People are still going to are staying. Even farmers whose crops are now in silos and can't be sold because of the Chinese trade war are saying we're going to give him a chance to sort this thing out. But they're only talking about it in terms of weeks and months, because once the silos are full, as they are now, they can't get rid of it. What happens next year? So a lot of the support for him is qualified. Is he going to bring jobs back to America? Is he going to make America great again in that way? We went to the industrial northeast and saw cities which are clearly never going to return to the sort of boom towns that they were. That's the thing. Is this experiment really going to work? Is he going to actually deliver, or is it going to be a whole...
And look, the other question is, you know, the Democrats found a way to bring down Trump in 2 years' time. I'm not sure if we quite saw it in the in the midterms, but
you didn't, because what was happening was that they were focusing essentially on healthcare, and Obamacare is now a big plus in America, even amongst Republican voters, funnily enough. But amongst Democrats, it was all about Trump. as of this week, probably, names are going to start popping up, and they're going to be the people who are going to start putting their hands up for the presidency or the nomination. That's when you're going to start seeing the arguments get more refined.
We've got to go to a break, unfortunately. Bruce, Hawker and Fiona Scott, good to talk to both of you. Thanks for joining.